Hooked. Welcome, Warriors. Today, I give you the review on all the versions of Street Fighter 3. So here is my view of them all. Let's get into it. Street Fighter 3 New Generation. New Generation gets a lot of things right as a sequel. The graphic work and art direction are stunning, and the music is amazing, utilizing Capcom's CPS-3 arcade board to great use. The gameplay has received some new elements, including 3 selectable super arts for each character, each having its own strengths, weaknesses, and even use. Ryu, for example, is proficient in 3 martial arts: Shinku Hadouken, Denjin Hadouken, and Shin Shoryuken. Shinku Hadouken has a medium-sized super bar and has decent combo utility. Shin Shoryuken has a large meter bar and does insane damage, but is more difficult to use outside of combos. And Denjin Hadouken has the smallest bar and does the least amount of damage, but deals a massive amount of stun if charged up fully and becomes unblockable. This allows players to experiment with different playstyles, and I believe it adds a lot of depth to the game. Let's get to the main attraction, parries. Parrying is perhaps New Generation's most significant feature to Street Fighter as a whole, and what distinguishes it from most fighting games, at least at the time of release. Parrying allows you to completely negate an attack during its active frames, including specials and supers, by pressing either forward for high attacks or down for low attacks at no cost to your health. It also allows you to perform a counterattack, but it isn't something you can do at will. Parrying demands you to not only properly foresee your opponent's next move, but also to respond in the exact frame of the attack. If you are a second late or too early, the assault will hit your ass. This adds so much to the game in terms of both offensive and defensive play, and it truly distinguishes the casual players from the high-level players. Even though I'm terrible at it, I believe it's a fantastic addition to the game. All of this sounds great, right? Wow, New Generation looks like a terrific game. Well, if the darn thing was completed. First and foremost, the game contains several bugs. Characters such as Ibuki may juggle you simply by pressing or standing HK and moving forward, which resets the game's juggling counter. Hitboxes are also all over the place, with moves missing for no reason and characters having invincibility frames when they shouldn't. Also, let's face the elephant in the room, Ryu and Ken are the only returning characters. I'm not sure why they did that, but it gives the game a sense of incompleteness. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy the new characters in this game, but no Chun-Li? No Guile? Is it only Ryu and Ken? That's not exactly a deal breaker, but I can see why it turned off so many people when it was first released. Also, to be honest, the game doesn't feel that enjoyable to play, especially in compared to titles like Alpha 2. It's tight and accurate, sure, but it's not as enjoyable to manage. New Generation certainly required more time in the oven before it was ready to be released. Capcom must have agreed, since we received a revision 7 months later. Street Fighter 3 Second Impact. SFII New Generation's update. Akuma, Urien, and Hugo are the 3 new characters added in Second Impact. Yang, Yun's brother and returning Kung Fu skater, also got a completely new playstyle and moveset. Technically speaking, Yang is now the 4th new character in the game, giving it a far more varied cast than SF3 New Generation. Although Akuma and Urien may be considered sprite clones due to their utilization of other fighters' base animations, they nevertheless have a few special moves and animate incredibly fluidly, in addition to having distinct playstyles. But without a doubt, the most eye-catching new character in SF3 is the enormous professional wrestler Hugo, also known as Anorv by Capcom fans from the original arcade game Final Fight. Since there wasn't really a big guy in SF3 Next Generation other than Alex, Hugo undoubtedly took over as the next large guy in Street Fighter, and wow, he's big. Hugo also has some remarkably fluid 2D animation for a character sprite of that size. Hugo makes a statement with his clumsy, lumbering pro wrestling approach, which is unlike anything we've ever seen in fighting games. Some new gameplay improvements have made SF3s more technical in addition to having a more varied lineup. The addition of EX specials enables players to increase the speed and/or power of their character's special attacks by using their super gauge energy. Although players can still choose from 3 distinct super arts for each character, they can also use multiple EX specials to vary things up or spend a meter on their super art. SF3, New Generation's somewhat slow gameplay was one of its primary problems, but being a relaunch game, Capcom was naturally playing it safe and returning to the fundamentals. The EX specials in Second Impact significantly improve gaming speed and introduce a variety of fresh tactics to every game. The EX specials from Second Impact would subsequently be borrowed by numerous other fighting games for decades. In addition to being tightened up, the parrying method in Second Impact proved to be more reliable and difficult than in the first. In terms of graphics, Second Impact is among Capcom's best and unquestionably one of the most attractive 2D combat games available at the time. The returning character artwork was lifted from the original game, but of course, the new characters were drawn in the same fantastic, sketchy style, which really sets the series apart from others artistically. In addition to character-selected photos, this also offers artwork depicting victories and defeats following conflicts. Additionally, Second Impact showcases a number of brand new hand-drawn stages, including a number of vintage settings that return with fresh visuals. Lastly, the animation in Street Fighter III remains the best in its class. Not just in terms of fluidity and the incorporation of numerous real martial arts techniques, but particularly in terms of the ouch factor. Nothing is more enjoyable to me than performing moves like Hugo's throw into clothesline, Alex's hyper bomb, Ken's Shinryuken, and so on. In addition to being visually appealing, SFII's animation makes the game feel fluid and particularly enjoyable to play. SFII allow players to anticipate their opponent's assaults, parry, and respond with hard-hitting, stylish badassery. Street Fighter III Third Strike. Third Strike is the third and final iteration of Street Fighter III and one of Capcom's best titles. The first thing novices will notice about the brawler is its stunning visual appeal. While the resolution is lesser than that of the Guilty Gear series, the detail and animation are unmatched by any other fighter. Clothes ripple as if genuine wind is blowing against individual pixels, muscle definition is skillfully colored, and the use of light and shadow lends a subtle depth to character animation, resulting in a level of realistic movement that is distinct from that of 3D fighters. If you have doubts about this, play the game and have someone pretend to be Elena. You'll think she's been rotoscoped as you see her dodge and weave around the screen. Sometimes the backgrounds are as visually stunning as the fights. So much so that, in an attempt to see every last bit of the landscape, gamers will frequently find themselves wanting to send their opponent as high into the sky as they can. The highlight of Hugo's attic stage is when he floors an opponent, causing a series of unintentional animations as the wrestler's possessions bounce in response to the impact of fallen fighters. At their finest, the musical themes are ebullient, but none of them will ever be as memorable as those from Street Fighter II. These are tracks that clearly belong to video games, in contrast to many of the symphonic themes that go with the high-end games on contemporary platforms. Some developers seem to undervalue this feature these days. No sane person would be upset about the fact that some of the character themes seem to be lifted from the original Streets of Rage soundtrack. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said about Yun Stage's obvious James Bond ripoff soundtrack. If the game played like poker without a full deck, all of the effort put into the presentation would be a pointless waste of time. Fortunately, Capcom has a strong hand and high aces. With the exception of the fact that each fighter can only employ one of 3 possible super moves, Street Fighter III functions largely like a standard 2D fighter. By eliminating too many extravagant combos, the player is encouraged to try out more realistic combat techniques instead of depending solely on corny moves that drain energy. The addition of parries, a smart blocking technique that eliminates damage and gives the player a moment to counterattack, aids with this. The parry is a dangerous move that could leave the player even more vulnerable to a pounding. It is executed by tapping forward at the same moment an opposing attack would connect. However, if you get the trick right, there are lots of rewards. The score bonus and the chance to change the outcome of a battle to the player's favor make the risk worthwhile. There has never been a more exhilarating experience in any Street Fighter than parrying oneself out of a corner and leveraging that split-second pause to score a win. If you want to win cockily in Versus, you must master the parry in single-player mode, because it depletes the player's super art meter and has some intriguing side effects. The ability to raise the damage of special techniques also adds a strategic aspect. For instance, doubling up a fireball may frequently surprise an opponent since they would stop the initial ball but not the one that follows it covertly. Street Fighter III welcomes the return of Capcom's Extra Rounds. The blocking training, in which the player is pelted with Sean's basketballs, is an excellent chance to learn high and low parrying. While the ceremonial demolition of the motorcar makes its third appearance since Final Fight and Street Fighter II. The PS2 version, which was previously only accessible on the Dreamcast, has a few improvements that are only noticeable to the most ardent World Warriors fans. The awful Street Fighter rap is still included in this release, but the vertical borders have been removed and the audio and visuals have been slightly enhanced. The reintroduction of the arcade moves that were eliminated from the DC version is the biggest enhancement. However, some players could view this as a drawback because many of those moves are unblockable. Fortunately, the extensive customization of the Versus mode preserves the Dreamcast transition. And Capcom has judiciously added a save feature after obviously learning from their faults with Hyper Street Fighter II. Similar to Street Fighter II, Third Strike offers the ideal balance of depth and accessibility to appeal to both novices and experts. Only the most ardent fans who want for an almost arcade-perfect version can suggest the PS2 version to owners of the DC version. However, everyone else ought to view this as a necessary buy. Warrior, we're waiting for you to come back. OUTRO. That era of fighting games, Street Fighter III started as being one of the biggest letdowns when it originally came out into one of the best fighting games by the time Third Strike entered the tournament scene. The parry system is what carried these games the most and is one of the best mechanics that came out in Street Fighter to date. If you still haven't played it, go play it. Specifically, the online edition. Thank you for watching, and until next time, Warriors.